And welcome to City of Longview's Community Development Division's fiscal year 2020-2021 CDB grant subrecipient training. Thank you guys all for making it out this evening. I know due to COVID that we have had to make some changes this year as far as how we present this meeting. However, if you'll bear with me, I'll try to get us out and going back to our business as quickly as possible. So first and foremost, as far as our grant is concerned, everything that we do is under a contractual basis to view what the potential stipulations, rules, regulations, and any pertinent details as to specific national objectives and the governance that is listed under HUD for these community development block grant dollars. Every link that you see here in front of you will be provided, as well as a copy of the presentation based off of the email that you supplied to register for this webinar. So at the end of the presentation on tomorrow's meeting, we will send out a group message via email to all of you containing all of the documents referenced here today or any other pertinent details that get discussed between today's and tomorrow's meetings. So we're going to be straightforward today and start off with our guidelines. The community development block grant funds are given on a formula basis to all cities with a population over 50,000. The amount received is based on the number of census tracts having a large portion of low to moderate income households, and these tracts are updated with census information on a regular basis. The grant is given to meet 3 national objectives set out by the Community Development Act. The national objectives are activities or programs that, 1, benefit low to moderate income persons, 2, address slum and blight, or 3, meet a particularly urgent community development need, such as funds to address natural disasters. To date, Longview has not used funds to meet this objective. Eligible requirements: to determine if a project is eligible, it must pass 7 basic steps. 1, be eligible as defined by the statute. 2, be either a new service or quantifiable increase of level of an existing service. This requirement does not prevent refunding the CDBG assisted public service at the time level of a subsequent year. 3, meet a category within an eligible activity. 4, meet a national objective. 5, be used for overall benefit for low to moderate income persons. And 6, must meet a cost reasonable guidelines as set forth by the federal government. Or 7, meet an environmental review requirement. One quick thing before we move forward on this, as far as the 7 different project eligibility guidelines, every aspect of these 7 are listed within the document Playing by the Rules, which I like to remind any potential grantee each year. This needs to be your playbook to go through the grant writing process. All of the specifics and individual minutia that could be described as far as CDBG block grant requirements will be listed here and acts as an adequate translation from the original guidances that are given to us by the regulations through HUD. Organizational requirements. All organizations participating in the CDBG program as a subrecipient must: 1, possess a nonprofit charter issued by the state of Texas. 2, possess a 501c3 tax exemption status issued by the Internal Revenue Service. 3, possess a current financial audit for the previous program year. If your organization has expended $750,000 or more in federal money, you must submit an A-133 audit form. Financial management guidelines. 1, internal controls. Does your agency have a written set of policies and procedures that define staff qualifications, duties, lines of authority, separation of functions, and access to assets and sensitive documents? 2, accounting records. Does your agency maintain adequate financial accounting systems, the basic elements of which should include a chart of accounts, general ledger, cash receipts journal, cash disbursements journal, payroll journal, payable and receivable ledgers, job cost journals, if involved specifically within construction. As a brief side note on this, these are the qualifications that we will be looking for, specifically denoted not only within your grant application, but in the mandatory supplemental documentation that will be a part of your eventual submittal for this grant year. And finally, the third, allowable cost. Does your agency have a clearly defined set of standards, procedures for determining the reasonableness or allowability or allocable cost incurred that's consistent with the basic federal rules as listed with OMB Circulars A87 or A122? Financial management components for managing federal funds. Continuing, we'll go on number 4, which is source documentation. Does your agency maintain up-to-date files or the original source documentation? Some examples of this would be receipts, invoices, canceled checks, etc. For all of your financial transactions, including those involving obligations incurred and the use of CDBG program income. Number 5, budget controls. Does your agency maintain an up-to-date approved budget for all funded activities and perform a comparison of the budget with actual expenditures for each budget category? And finally, 6, cash management. Does your agency have a regular procedure for accurately projecting cash needs of the organization that will serve to maximize the time between the receipt of funds from the grantee and their actual disbursement? Financial reporting. Is your agency able to provide accurate, current, and complete disclosure of the financial results of each federally sponsored project or program in accordance with the reporting requirements of the grantee and HUD? And audit, when was your last independent public accountant audit, and what were the results? Does your agency have a copy of the management letter? Everything that's been listed prior to this in this financial management section are documents that we will be asking for within the supplemental section of your application. So whenever applying, please have those handy and ready to where we can make the most educated decision as to the awards under this community development grant year. Within CDBG, we are governed by both federal, state, and local procurement guidelines. So any services that require the expenditure of funds for either materials, construction, or any sort of asset for the good of the public service, public facility, or construction-related project listed under an appropriate national objective will have to go by City of Longview procurement policies. Requirements for using federal funds to purchase materials under this program follow a free and open competitive process in securing those products and services, properly documenting purchasing activities and decisions, observe the special rules for particular kinds of purchases, small purchases, competitive field bids, competitive proposals, and sole source procurement, while also properly ensuring that all bond and insurance work involving large construction contracts and subcontracts are followed. We also use local businesses and contract with small, minority, and/or women-owned businesses to maximize the extent feasible. For any information regarding specific procurement and contracting guidelines under HUD, we do have specific guidance for bidding and contracting. Section 3, which under HUD is the aspect of contracts that are given to low to moderate income, minority, or women-owned businesses. There are specific incentives for those specific programs that meet those definitional criteria, and any construction project listed under our CDBG guidelines that would be done in an extensive in excess of our procurement standards will be subject to Davis-Bacon requirements, which can be listed at the links there. And any contractors that are used on these projects will have to be registered and non-debarred within the SAM.gov registry system. Management and disposition of property. Real property means land including any improvements to structures located on the land, but excluding movable machinery and equipment. Personal property is basically any kind of property other than real property. Personal property can be tangible, such as supplies, furniture, equipment. Intangible, such as copyrights, patents, and inventions. Further distinctions can be made between both non-expendable personal property and expendable personal property. Non-expendable personal property, which generally is considered to include tangible personal property, having a useful life of more than 1 year and an acquisition cost of at least $300 or more per unit. Expendable personal property includes all tangible personal property other than non-expendable personal property. I apologize for the definitions. I know we're going through, especially the previous grantees that are listening in this evening may realize that we're going quite a bit more on the definitional direction. We just like to clarify a lot of the intent and language that's going to be used within this application. That way, every competitive application is on the same page in a crystal clear fashion. Continuing along with real property, the subrecipient agreement will be explicit about the use of any real property under their control that was acquired or improved in whole or in part with CDBG funds in excess of $2,500. For such instances, referred to 24 CFR 570.503. This will also be referred to again in the Playing by the Rules packet. Again, everything that I'm talking about today will be explained in much further detail within that guidance. So I highly encourage anybody that is looking to apply, both new and older grantees, to go ahead and give that a look to make sure that we're all putting our best foot forward with our individual grant applications. Continuing on, this must be used for the subrecipient to continue or meet one of the CDBG's program national objectives for at least 5 years after the expiration of the subrecipient agreement, or longer time as specified by the grantee in the subrecipient agreement. So essentially, depending on how much money is used to acquire any of these resources, the eventual subrecipient contract will reflect the individual, what we like to call affordability periods of where those assets have to be directed specifically to the initial national objective that was listed within their application. If national objective is not met during this time period, the grantee must be reimbursed for the current fair market value, less any portion of values attributable to non-CDBG funds. So if, for instance, in the process after the grantee has been granted these funds and the objective isn't met at any point in time, that could be subject for reimbursement where the subrecipient would need to, in exchange, pay back the grantee those funds. Continuing on, personal property for nonprofit subrecipients, title for personal property acquired within CDBG funds is vested to the subrecipient and is subject to the following conditions. In all cases in which personal property is no longer needed by the subrecipient for CDBG activities, it must be transferred to the grantee for a CDBG program, or it can be retained by the subrecipient after compensation to the grantee. The grantee may reserve the right to transfer title of the equipment to the federal government or a third party. And in all cases which personal property is sold, the proceeds will be considered program income. The residual inventory of unused supplies exceeding $5,000 not needed by the subrecipient for CDBG activities must be transferred to the grantee for the CDBG program or can be retained after the compensating the grantee. In all cases in which the residual inventory of supplies is sold, the proceeds are considered program income. And the federal government reserves a royalty-free, non-exclusive, irrevocable license to reproduce, publish, or otherwise use and authorize to use for federal government purposes the copyright to any work developed within CDBG funds, any rights to copyright which subrecipient or contract purchases with CDBG support. Getting on to general record keeping requirements, all administrative records, these and files and records that apply to the overall administration of the subrecipient's CDBG activities. Your financial records, these include charts of accounts, manual on accounting procedures, accounting journals, ledgers, source documentation, procurement files, bank account records, financial reports, audit files, etc. Project and case files. These files and document the activities undertaken with respect to the individual beneficiaries, property owners, and/or properties. And quarterly reports will be required no later than 10 days after each quarter. Pay requests may be submitted quarterly or monthly. Comment further on this, if you are to receive a sub-grant under the CDBG grant here, we do have quarterly monitorings where we check in and will be this year moving forward with checking on individual aspects of this via submissions within our application software and case file monitoring software, Neighborly. Program income, any gross income received by the subrecipient that was directly generated from the use of CDBG funds, programmatic and budget changes, a subrecipient agreement and/or the grantee's written policies must specify when prior approval of the grantee is necessary for a programmatic or budgetary change relative to the subrecipient CDBG funded activities. The next section is going to kind of detail and list of what we're expecting as far as the written statutes of which you're agreeing to from this application. Whenever we do start these activities, it's important that as you're writing down your application and filling this out in the near future, that we have kind of cohesive goal as to what you're looking to do under that national objective, and be firm in that, because until the project's completed and or any sort of substantial change order is made for the process, we will be locked into those eventual goals and pre-planned application information. We also adhere to civil rights, fair housing, employment, and contracting opportunities. Therefore, any subgrantee would be subject to these means as well. The subrecipient agreement must require the subrecipient to administer its CDBG funds in compliance with the following federal laws and executive orders and implementation regulations. Environmental review requirements. No party involved with the projects, including subrecipients, may commit funds to the project, including incurring project costs, until the grantee completes the appropriate environmental review and public notification process, along with HUD approving the certification of compliance with environmental laws and request for release of funds from environmental conditions. We also adhere to historic preservation. Each time that a project is undertaken, we will consult with state historic preservation officers to denote whether or not the structure being affected would be applicable under those guidances. We also follow both EPA, HUD, and OSHA lead-based paint regulations. We stick to a strict conflict of interest policy. There are two sets of conflict of interest provisions applicable to activities carried out with CDBG funding. The first is set and applicable to procurement of goods, services, and subrecipients. These regulations are located, again, in 24 CFR 84.42. And the second set of provisions is located in 24 CFR 570. These provisions cover situations not covered by each of the previous supporting sections. Suspension and termination. When the problems arise in a performance of the subrecipient grant, the grantee is responsible for taking the appropriate actions and correcting these deficiencies, including suspending and terminating the CDBG activities being carried out by the subrecipient. Audits and monitoring. We kind of touched on this already, just a bit. However, due to the fact that these are federal funds, as you can see with the administrative requirements, the specific national objectives, also the vast amount of information that we've covered so far, everything must be accounted for, both in the city's documentation and also in the subrecipient's documentation and execution of the project. So the way that we ensure this is that we do have monitoring and audits. The city takes an audit yearly, and we as a subgrantee are audited by our regional office on a basis determined based off of how we follow these rules and regulations. Grantee is responsible for ensuring that all CDBG funds under its oversight are used in accordance with program requirements and for determining the adequacy of its subrecipients' performance. According to the grantee, is empowered to make site visits and review program files as necessary to fulfill these responsibilities. So that's where it comes in for the individual monitorings that will be performed for the subrecipients as the grant year progresses. COVID has made that a much more informal process due to the fact that we're trying to continue to control the spread of that. So most of those are done in individual phone calls and document requests that are given via the division to the individual subgrantee. Finally, what most of you guys have been waiting for the entire presentation, how do we go about applying? After you've navigated through this vast amount of information within this presentation, going through, checked up on playing by the rules, have a concrete idea as far as what you would like to apply for under this Community Development Block Grant fiscal year, what we're going to do is at the end, like I've mentioned before, with the documents we'll be sending you, where whatever you signed up today under, as far as the email that you're watching this presentation currently with, we will, at Friday after the end of the last presentation, we will send out a link to this application portal. Whoop. Can we go back really quick? Okay. Once you're there, it's fairly simple to navigate through. It's going to ask you to go ahead and register by providing an email address and password. And then in the concurrent page, there will be a selection for CDBG and this program here. If you have any questions regarding accessing the application, my information will be listed on the last slide of this, and we can definitely help you get there. But outside of providing you access to it and helping getting into the application, this becomes a competitive process at the point in which we submit those links to your individual email addresses, and we won't be able to give any sort of consultation outside of clarification of things that have already been stated within this presentation and definitional questions as far as the application is concerned. So timeline. Today is Thursday the 4th. We're having our first subrecipient meeting. We will have another tomorrow at same time. And on Monday, the 8th, the application period will officially begin. You'll have access to the application from Friday on, but Monday is when the official time starts. And those applications will be open for submission all the way through April 2nd. That will end. That's going to end firmly at 5 p.m. And we'll shut down the acceptance of applications, and then we will start the review process and selecting who will be subgrantees for this concurrent year. All of you that are, of course, signed in today will also have contact information from your email addresses to alert you as to when the awards will be going out, and we'll inform you as the process goes along with more information as to when the fiscal year will be beginning, contracts, environmental reviews, et cetera, and we'll move forward in the process till then. So I believe next we have questions and answers. So if you guys have any of those, we'll take those now. And Richard, do we have anybody pinging in?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people are here. If you have a question, please use the raise your hand function in the teleconferencing software. We'll give people a second to raise their hand if they want to ask a question. And no, Dakota, I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand at this time with a specific question.
Okay. Well, that being said, I appreciate everybody taking the time to sign on this evening, and we look forward to seeing each and every one of your grant applications as they come through. And once again, as I stated before, we will be sending those invitations to the application out Friday after the conclusion of this webinar. So thank you guys for coming out this evening, and I hope you guys have a wonderful evening.